Time for the roar. Yes, of the lion. It's Daniel and the deacons. Deacon Dan Brahier joining us right now. And, of course, he is talking a little bit about some of the deacons that are called to the Permanent Deacon Personnel Board. You're part of that body, right? And so you get to really kind of get to know all these guys, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Good morning. I was just thinking about how that may have been one of my favorite things about our trip to Alaska was the internet-free zone. When you're in some of the national parks and so forth, there you have no access to your phone, your email, anything, and it's just kind of very free to do that once in a while. So
it's interesting how it's a curse for some and a blessing for others.
Exactly. There's something to be said for being unplugged. So,
yeah, absolutely.
We have kind of two different governing bodies, if you will, within the group of deacons for the diocese. And it's somewhat unique to our diocese. Not everyone is organized that way. So I find out from talking to peers that they may have one group or the other or neither or whatever. But last week we talked a little bit about the Permanent Deacon Council. So that's a group of 13 deacons plus the vicar for clergy and myself who kind of oversee big picture. We fly the plane at 35,000 feet, look at what deacons are doing and make recommendations to our bishop. This group, the what we call the Deacon Personnel Board is different. There is a priest personnel board as well, and so it kind of parallels their mission. But the personnel board it's a lot of fun. It's a small group. It's made up of only 5 deacons plus myself and the vicar for clergy. And unlike the deacon council, in which the 13 members are appointed for their terms, the deacon personnel board, they are elected. So what happens is that if you take the list of all of the active deacons in the diocese and you put them by order of their ordination, and then divide them into 5 groups. Each of those groups forms what we call a seniority group, and that group elects a deacon to be on the personnel board. So what we're trying to do is to get representation from men that were just ordained last September, as well as men that were ordained 25 years ago or more. So to make sure that we have a good broad representation into these 5 seniority groups. And when they're elected by all of the deacons in the diocese. They serve for 3 years. They can be reelected for another 3 years. But during that 3-year term, then the 5 of them and the 2 of us, a group of 7, meet throughout the year with 2 main purposes. If you think of the kind of personnel, what does that mean? It is exactly what you would expect. Like if you're in a business, and you're doing HR and personnel, you're making sure that people are performing the best they can and that they're doing the jobs that they should be doing. So one of the things, main charges of the personnel board is to talk about assignments of deacons. Where is a deacon going to go? Where is he going to serve? How long is he going to be there? I get that question at our parish all the time.
Mm-hmm.
How long are you going to be at St. Thomas More? I think they want to know, like, are you, is the car running yet? But I get asked that question because they are aware that, there are some deacons that within, 10 or 15 years might serve in 3 different parishes. And there are other deacons who might be, in a parish for 25 or 30 years and never leave there. Mm-hmm. And so kind of what determines that and who determines that? Well, of course, ultimately that decision is up to Bishop Thomas. But the direct answer to that question, when somebody says, how long will you be in a parish? The real answer is, I don't know. Because as a deacon, you may be assigned to a parish and serve there for a year or 2, and a couple of years later, you're really needed more somewhere else, and you may be asked to leave and go to a different parish. On the other hand, you might be assigned to a parish and be there 5, 10, 15, 20 or more years because that parish continues to have a need, and you're it, so you just stay. So I have been, as of September, I will have been at St. Thomas More for 9 years. Will I be at St. Thomas More for another 9 years? Possible, but it's also possible that they could move me a year from now. So I don't know. So we go kind of year by year, depending on what is needed in the diocese. And that's the conversation that the personnel board has, because the personnel board will do a survey of the pastors in the diocese and say, hey, you have a deacon. Do you want another one? Can you live with less? Could this deacon be shared with another parish, et cetera? And we get input from our pastors. We also talk to deacons who, depending on their assignment, maybe they got a new job and they've moved from one city to another, and they're going to need to move in terms of where they're serving, or a need comes up and maybe a deacon either passes away or declares senior status or retired, and that parish that they're leaving really needs a person to plug in. Can we move somebody to that parish? So the personnel board will look at all of the things that the deacons are doing. Where are they? What do the pastors need? And come up with a list of recommendations to the bishop of, we might want to consider moving this person to that parish.
Now, Deacon Dan, how often do these conversations with the pastors happen, the surveys and checking with them? Is that a periodic thing?
Yeah, the discussions are at least every time another group is going to be ordained, we will survey them kind of formally. But informally, the conversations go on pretty regularly. So I will get a phone call from a pastor saying, hey, I know that my deacon is going to be senior status and he's going to be living, in Florida half of the year. I could use extra help. Is there anybody that could be moved? Is there anybody available? That kind of a thing. And we asked them to kind of put it formally in writing, so Bishop Thomas has a copy of that as well. So I would say the dialogue with pastors is ongoing, but a formal process of surveying them would be at least every 3 or 4 years. So, because we do want to stay in dialogue with them, because things change all the time. I mean, if you have 2 parishes, for example, that may be sharing a pastor, then those 2 parishes may also share their deacon. And so a deacon would get reassigned to both parishes at the same time. And then the other thing that comes to play in that is the personnel board is also responsible for evaluating the performance of deacons. And a lot of times people don't even realize that that's going on the outside unless they're involved in some kind of a parish survey. But every 6 years minimum, every deacon in the diocese has kind of a performance evaluation. And they have to do a self-evaluation of their ministry. Their pastor evaluates their ministry, as do members of the staff in the parish. And then we send a survey out to a sample of parishioners in that parish to get feedback on how's he doing, what is he involved with, what do you wish he was doing more of, how is his preaching, is it relevant to you on Sundays, and all those kind of things. And we gather a number of different data points on each deacon, and then they meet with their pastors, and then they meet with a person from the personnel board. So it's a real process there. And the idea is to help them. I know I went through the evaluation a couple of years ago myself. It was just really helpful to know, what are your parishioners in the pews thinking, and what do they wish you did more of, and what do they wish you did less of,
Yeah, I would think that would be a great gift, because we never get that direct feedback, because, you can't ask people directly. I mean, you have to have somebody ask those questions for you.
Yeah, it's a really nice way of being able to get lots of different perspectives on your ministry. I learned so much from it. I know that I do better now, having gotten that input a couple of years ago, that there has to be a process for that. So Personnel Board is actively engaged in that every year.
And this has been an enlightening kind of a mini-series that you've done. Now, we're on vacation next week, but you'll be back in August, right?
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Deacon Dan Brahier, Daniel in the Deacon's Den.